and we built our own ML classifier based on some data that we have in a Snowflake data lake. And although the classifier's performance wasn't stellar, and although the chances that we actually adopt that into our SOC and continue to train that model and have it drive a meaningful or material impact on like signal to noise ratios is low to none, the learning curve that we were able to go down and learn model selection and learn attribute selection and learn where do these artifacts go and learn how to build an ML pipeline in a meaningful way inside of the Snowflake ecosystem and so on and so forth, I think is really important from a learning curve perspective.
We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast about the business of cyber and tech, here to help you or your business improve. Here's your host, Wil Klu. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Another episode, Keyboard Samurai. Like, subscribe, all that good BS. Help the channel out. And of course, we're going to be talking about AI. I know we're tired of talking about it, but we're not really tired of talking about
it. Yeah.
So I brought in somebody pretty special, and I'm excited to chat about this. So Matt, why don't you give us the 30 seconds of who you are and why we care?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Matt Sharp. I'm the CISO at Xactly. We're a Vista-backed PE company. We provide intelligent revenue services, which means we basically help sales reps understand how much they're going to get paid when they sell stuff. And I'm a co-author of the book, The CISO Evolution. I think we're relatively forward in terms of our AI adoption and have been, just trying to keep up, just like everybody else. It seems like every other day we get a new exciting adventure, whether it's a MCP or Mythos or something else. So here we go. Yeah,
for sure. It's you suggested the topic, and I love it because we haven't talked about this, which is AI adoption, right? And you guys being, like you said, a little forward looking. I think I think there are some organizations that are. I think there's a lot that are kind of realizing some of the hype was overpromised, and there's kind of a mix of that. So when you think about AI adoption, what is like the top one or three things that comes to mind that you're like, hey, people really need to consider this?
Man, so I guess I look at it through two lenses. I have a more business forward lens, and then I have the cybersecurity lens, right? So if I put on my business forward lens, I serve as the chair of the AI governance and guidance committee. And we're doing a bunch of things that you would expect, like figuring out what's the greatest opportunity to create value for the business, and then translating those into the best investments that we can make, both from a workforce productivity as well as from a value creation for our customers. And so I guess my perspective would be different in each of those seats. I think right now, because so much is in experimental stage, and will continue to, the innovation horizon has come in so dramatically off of Moore's law. I think being willing to place bets but recognize that they're temporary is probably the most important thing that I would say in that regard. And then if I put on my security hat, being ready to respond to the fact that your business is going to place bets and then change their minds, because there's no best practice, and we don't have enough time in seat or in saddle to say this is the go-to architecture, or this is the core series of protocols, or this is the best practices. And I think folks like OWASP and MITRE and NIST and others are trying to help give the industry guidance, CSA. But I think the reality is this is just moving so dang fast. So
I like you said, they're going to be placing bets, but be able to change quickly, right? So that tells me from a CISO perspective,
as much agility. As that makes me sort of cringe.
Right. So it's about agility.
Agility,
then, right?
Yeah.
So as a CISO, how do you build that agility? What's sort of I know, like you said, there's not a framework, but what do we do to get started, and what do we do to make sure that we are agile?
I mean, I think you use the right word, build. I think if you're going to be aggressive on the front end of adoption, you're going to be an early adopter. And some people's businesses don't allow for that. But if you are, then you have to be a builder. And I think what that means is there's a robust ecosystem out there of people that want to build solutions. And you can't sit around and wait for, somebody to build a company, sell it to Palo Alto, and for Palo Alto to integrate it into their platform before you start securing the stuff that you're working on. Like, you just can't do that. It's too damn late. And you can't sit around on your hands and wait for choose your VAR of choice to tell you who's the emerging vendor, because we've seen consolidated purchases through a number of players. It's too late. So I think you got to be a builder. So find your favorite PE company, make friends, and start co-designing or co-building. Start design partnerships and get after it.
Yeah, I like the design partnerships as somebody who works with both startups and pretty well established companies. There's a lot of harmony between those two types of organizations working together. A lot of benefit for both sides of that, for sure. I bet you're probably seeing some of that yourself, actually, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a handful of folks in the environment that we partnered with a year and a half and 2 years ago that have been sold. We've got a handful more that are still in stealth. So yeah, our stack is leaned into this very heavily. It's also interesting. Our staffing has had to evolve. I think I had some folks that were used to the sort of enterprise software motion, and when you're in this design partnerships, you have to have a certain tolerance for ambiguity and recognize what's important and what's not. And some things are just not going to be available right away. And some people can't handle that. I think is probably the truth. And so I think there's a certain personality type and culture that over the last 3 years we've cultivated in order to provide transparent and meaningful feedback to our vendors, help them differentiate between what's an absolute must-have versus like this is a nice-to-have. And I think more often than not, the co-innovation cycle allows us to get the things that we want totally customized to exactly what we want. And for me, it feels like we have an entire product development team, in the wings, and I like that because it allows us the opportunity to sort of keep pace. And even then, we're always inherently going to be one step behind, right? So, yeah.
So inherently one step behind. I like that. That's how security is. No matter how much we get ingrained into the business process and we tell people we need to be part of the processes, there's always somebody that goes around it. Do you think, and you're working at an AI first, AI, focused company. So I think you guys have a different perspective than say a CISO at a non-AI firm, pick whatever industry you are doing it. Do you think their adoption should, if you were in that other industry's shoes, would you still adopt the same way that you do today?
That's a good question. I think so. Here's I recently published a blog. We did this really cool project with a group, and we built our own ML classifier based on some data that we have in a Snowflake data lake. And although the classifier's performance wasn't stellar, and although the chances that we actually adopt that into our SOC and continue to train that model and have it drive a meaningful or material impact on like signal to noise ratios is low to none, the learning curve that we were able to go down and learn model selection and learn attribute selection and learn where do these artifacts go and learn how to build an ML pipeline in a meaningful way inside of the Snowflake ecosystem and so on and so forth, I think is really important from a learning curve perspective. I think back to, when I got started, I was trying to be an MCSE or a CCNA and I couldn't make it up my mind, right? It was going to be one or the other. And at the time I was writing code. And so, yeah, so like I was doing the software development, thinking about system admin and dreaming about being a network guy. And those were all the foundational skills that made me good in this role as a consultant the years that followed. But we don't have any experience with all of this tech now, right? Like nobody knows, most of us, the vast majority of us do not know uh, how neural networks are built or understand, the core basics of large language models. And I think inherently that creates the dependency on your vendor landscape or on some third party. I don't think CISOs need to tackle that learning curve. I think some will and are. My co-author, for example, is enrolled in a data science degree at Denver University. And I think his thirst for the foundational knowledge that he can build upon will drive that. But both he and I said, for example, you don't need an MBA in order to be relevant to the business. And I think it's also true. You don't have to become a data scientist to secure all of these frameworks and workflows. But I do think that you have to be curious and voraciously reading and trying to tackle that learning curve. And I think
and voracious. I love that.
Yeah, like a financial services group that's out there that has a ton to lose. Like, put the big guys out there who have multi-billion-dollar. I sat in a room the other day with one of these guys, multi-billion-dollar budgets. They're also tackling the learning curve. I think their ability to allow the business to adopt things and their need to sort of strictly adhere to compliance and the sort of downside risk of violating the law and becoming the example of the EU AI Act or something like that is that's a legit real thing. But they also can't sit on their hands because, we've seen 50% of the S&P 500 from 10 years ago doesn't exist today. And that will be true in 10 years. And it's probably more like 60 or 70% won't be here. So
maybe even sooner. So,
yeah,
but what I am hearing you say though, is it is worth the time, maybe not the CISO, but it's worth the time for their teams to, I don't want to say fiddle around and downplay it, but like learn, like spend time learning what's, how these things work. Because that knowledge is valuable and transferable, even if you don't adopt it then.
Yeah. And I think like when I attend CISO events, I was at one the other day, Michael Picente, I'll give him a call out because he runs a really nice, he calls it the CISO Sanctuary. And there's a group of 40 or so folks, and we went around the room and just talked about the stuff. And there are different use cases. Like some people are doing meaningful building. A lot of people are playing with Cursor these days and, doing everything from like vibe coding. So one guy had this really cool situation where he was trying to secure tee times from the local golf courses on Fridays. And it can be a little tricky, and he vibe coded a solution to secure his tee times and stuff. So I don't know. I think those tinkering projects, like that's how a lot of us got into this. And I think that curiosity has to continue. And if it's not you, then definitely somebody in the team needs to be doing that. So,
yeah, I can vouch for that. I mean, as somebody who uses AI every day in personal and professional life, like that whole, like if I hadn't, like I have a writing coach that's basically been trained on authors I like to help me with my writing. I have a brand coach that helps me with my LinkedIn content and consistency. I have one for my company's brand values and our messaging and everything. And I mean, and if I hadn't, and all of those models, projects, GPTs, whatever they are, they're all better now than when they were first built, because the first couple of times I was like, oh, this is easy. And well, no, it's not doing what I want. And then you dig into it a little more. And it's funny because it will coach you
on how to fix it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing is like the memory management has gotten better. The models have obviously become much more sophisticated. I think our understanding on how to fine tune these frontier models has also improved. Pipelines are also sort of evolving. And so I think we're seeing some of that inside of the product. And I think for those who are adopting, like even the Whizzes and the Sentinel ones, and like a lot of these players that have been around for a long time that put their chatbot in the, the little star thing in the top corner. I think that the output that you get from those is becoming more and more meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much, I mean, in where that has been done better, to go down a tangent, like that's replaced search, just like AI has replaced, typical Google search now. Like if you go to I know if I go to those websites, I can pull the chat button up and be like, I need to do this thing, or I need to find this thing, because it's going to be better. Or I'll just go ask ChatGPT before I go to the website. Right.
Yeah. I think my next project is honestly a central chat run at 3 different models, and then a judge with like some feedback on the best answer or something like that. And I don't think it would be that hard to build. But then if you're running it against Gemini and OpenAI and Claude, you pick a couple more if you want. But I think it helps you avoid the bias of the way that these models were trained, right? And if you see very consistent answers across 3 models, then like that's probably good prevailing information. And if not, then the question, like you have to become curious about the why, right? I mean, I think the same is like how narrow social media has focused all of our feeds and turned us into like really confirmation bias oriented consumers of information, right? So
yeah, well, that whole idea that you're only presenting the usually the beneficial, like the coolest parts of your life, not everything. And so the AI, I'm curious, I want to go down this little rabbit hole here a little bit, because with SLMs, I think you have the opportunity to remove some of that bias. And well, because you can specifically just make something specific for your use case, like just the chat bot, just the obviously just indexing your website's not sufficient enough. But I'm wondering what you think about like the prevalence of those becoming more and more relevant or existing for businesses today.
I mean, just token costs alone like are going to force the SLMs, and then the user interface and centralizing the user experience with like SLMs executed in some cases like client side, I think is going to force the presence and prevalence of that. But yeah, I think it's just in the disruptive force of how much our token's going to cost. And as people get familiar with asking questions, they start to ask more complex and sophisticated questions. One, but two, I think knowledge of how tokens are being consumed and how to properly frame questions, I think that's going to be an entire like workforce transformation skill. Because imagine you have 2 competitors side by side, right? And one has trained their people on how to properly ask the same questions, and they're getting, let's say, exactly the same outcomes, but the cost is quite different, quite a difference. The enterprise value and the ability to secure additional capital for future growth and other things like that could be meaningfully impacted by intelligent questions driving token consumption.
Intelligent questions driving token consumption. That right there is everybody, no matter what you do, you have to learn AI if you want to stay relevant in the workforce. And that right there is a perfect example of, hey, you want to get, I saw somebody write today about, the top percent of people aren't getting laid off. It's the bottom 90% of people who are, because businesses want less. I don't know that I totally agree with that, but I get where the sentiment was. It was like, the goal is to make, have efficient employees who use AI and not have, mediocre employees who are costing the company money, right?
I mean, I think there's validity to, in particular, where we see a lot of the skill almost entirely commoditized. Like, we have a 200-person dev team. Let's just say that your numbers were actually true on the dev side. And obviously, large language models have had a very disruptive impact on software development. What that would say is 10 of every 100 developers stay and the other 90 go, right? So if I could turn a 200-person dev team into a 20-person dev team and get, let's say, 60% more than I did a year ago, like that's a real meaningful path to some of the outcomes that private equity space are starting to demand. And what's interesting, I think, I forget who posted it. Somebody put, I'll tell you who it is, and maybe we can post a link to the post.
Yeah.
Somebody posted a summary of all of the sort of trend analysis over the last 6 to 12 months, Boston Consulting, McKinsey, Bain, and so on and so forth. So I said to Claude, go explore all of these and download it and give me a digest, and then help me translate that into what I should be thinking as a CISO. This would have taken me like forever. And what's really interesting is a lot of experiments out there, and a lot of capital deployed. The truth is this, those investments are now coming home to roost. And either you're going to produce outcomes, or companies are going to start running out of funding. You're not going to secure the next round. And a series of these like skunkworks projects are going to get shit canned in environments because they're not producing and delivering value, and we can't continue to pay the cost for all of these interesting experiments, because what our investors are here to make a buck. They're not necessarily here for like your entertainment or whatever the thing is. So and we're seeing that. So our PE group has put together some really meaningful metrics, and a couple of things are happening. One, the EBITDA and revenue expectations are now starting to mount. There is an expectation for outcomes. And two, a lot of the things that were considered AI adoption are now just considered table stakes and are being taken out of our maturity model, so that as people are in our portfolio are scored, you can gain a sense for benchmarks. But it's a really intelligent way, I think, for the group to drive value creation within the portfolio. And and it's interesting to see, like, this is coming from an investment company in order to drive value. And so if we're seeing it, I think there's got to be a handful of others that are also starting to see and feel that pressure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also like it because it seems like in the security space, startups can just go out there and continue to get funding, and profitability is never a concern. Just building up big enough for one of the big 5 or 10 to buy you. Yeah. And it just seems like a really weird business model.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Are you building a company or are you building a feature? And then I think the other thing that's interesting is, of course, like the Israeli space has done a really nice job of building these CISO networks that sort of almost, in a lot of ways, secure revenue for the investments that they drive. And so these guys, I mean, if they have a captive audience who are actively contributing back, which accelerates their path to, I think, product market fit, and you have a bunch of buyers that a lot of these guys are buying. And then what happens is revenue comes easy, so the next round comes easy, and then the sale comes easy. So I think it's more than just. I think it's the VC ecosystem that's also helping sort of this self-fulfilling thing. Now, you could say the other thing is true as well. Some of these leading VCs are doing fantastic diligence. They have a really good, strong, solid diligence process. So it's not just that you put anybody into here. Like, they're able to identify really talented teams who have strong, proven ability to execute and other things like that. But
we're very much more calculated versus the bets. And they're both, right? We see it all the time. And there's a lot of bets being placed. So, well, Matt, 100%. Thanks for that. That was awesome. We get to talk about AI and a little bit about the startup and PEVC world. If everybody wants to find you on the interwebs, where should they look?
I think it's CISO MBA on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best spot. Hit me up. Love to chat some more about this stuff. I can't believe we're already done. That was a blazing fast conversation. Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Love to come back if there's space, and hopefully this hits a chord with your audience.
Absolutely, Matt. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow Wil and the podcast on LinkedIn /Wil Klu. Visit Wil Klu ME for information on services he offers to help your cyber or tech business grow. Until next time, Xactly later.